Ladies and gentlemen, it's here. The 12-team college football playoff has arrived. First round games are going down on Friday night. They're going down on Saturday. And I'm going to preview them. I'm going to predict them. This is going to be juicy. The transfer portal is also fairly juicy. We are 1 week in, and I've got updates and reactions of everything that's gone on in the world of the transfer portal and the world of player movement. This is a Monday night edition, live Big Nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has arrived. It being the 12-team college football playoff. It is game week. The journey to January 20th. The journey to Atlanta, Georgia starts this weekend. Gonna preview and predict all three first-round playoff games involving Big Ten teams here tonight. Of course, it all goes down Friday night, the first on-campus college football playoff game, and it's the Indiana State Championship. Both the Irish and the Hoosiers have beaten Purdue soundly this season, let's just say that. So Indiana and Notre Dame meeting in the first round of the college football playoff in South Bend is for all the marbles in that state. So we're going to preview that one. That's going to go down Friday night in South Bend. Of course, we got SMU traveling to State College, Pennsylvania, in the middle of that state in the 11-6 matchup. And then in prime time on Saturday night, of course, maybe what might be the most interesting, the most intriguing first round matchup in the 8-9 game. Number 9 seed Tennessee travels to the Horseshoe to take on the 8th ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. Going to have complete breakdowns and predictions of those games coming up here. The transfer portal is hot. It is on fire. We are 1 week into this thing in the winter period, and there is all sorts of stuff to talk about. There's a team that really stands out to me, that's really hit the ground running and is going on an absolute heater to start off this transfer portal period. We will talk about that team, and we will talk about certain player movement in there as well. You know, there's all this talk about which player is going to go in the portal. Where is this player going to go? Is he going to go to that team, or is he going to go to this team? What about kids that are coming back to their school for 2025? And that's where I want to start with things. Drew Aller, it was announced by multiple sources today, he will be back for the 2025 season. And Luke Altmaier said it himself, the ultimate source at halftime of the Illinois-Tennessee basketball game this weekend. Luke says, yeah, I'm going to run it back one more year in Champaign for 2025. These are two of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. You know, Drew had, I think, the ability to go into the NFL draft field this year, but he certainly wasn't going to be at the top of the class. I think if 15 in blue and white comes back next season, he's going to be one of those guys that is going to be one of the faces of college football. He's going to be certainly one of the names of the 2026 NFL draft, and Penn State is going to be a contender once again at the top of college football, top of the Big Ten, of course. So that's going to make for a lot of excitement in the state of Pennsylvania for all the Nittany Lion blue and white fans over there. Now, they got to go out, and they got to help him out by getting some more top-level wide receivers. They got somebody in the transfer portal. We'll talk about a wide receiver out of the transfer portal. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the show. And then Luke Altmaier, quarterback for the orange and blue of the Illinois Fighting Illini. You know, Tyler Warren is going to be leaving State College, Pennsylvania. Pat Bryant, the great receiver who was top 3, I think, in the Big Ten, certainly top 5 in major statistical categories. I think he might have been second in the Big Ten in receiving yards, I thought, when all was said and done. But he's going to lose Pat Bryant, so they got to find a way to certainly get some more targets into Champaign, Illinois to help Luke out. But these are two big keeps for both of these teams to be able to build off of their success. Penn State went 11-1 in the regular year. Of course, Illinois with a great 9-3 season this past year. So all this talk about player movement, let's give some props. Let's give some props to guys that are sticking around. You know, when you're a customer you've been paying your cell phone bill for 6 years or 7 years at AT&T, they don't give you a reward. I give rewards to kids that are sticking around here, and Altmaier and Aller, certainly some A's at the top of the Big Ten, certainly right now. All right, folks, it is time to talk some football. It is time to dive into our first round matchup, that being the 10-7 matchup. On Friday night in South Bend, Indiana, it is the Indiana State Championship between the number 10 seed, the Indiana Hoosiers, 11-1, of course, coming out of our beloved Big Ten. They go to South Bend, Indiana, to take on the 7th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame is a 7.5-point favorite, 8 p.m. Eastern. This one goes down on ABC. It is worth noting there is television history in this matchup between the Hoosiers and the Irish. This is the first time since 1990 a network not named NBC or Peacock, so a non-NBC owned network, will be televising a game from Notre Dame Stadium. I hope the folks at Disney, ABC, and ESPN called up the folks at NBC and say, hey, where are those fiber lines? Where are those video lines? Where are those audio lines? We haven't been here in 30 years, maybe more than that. I know CBS certainly did some Notre Dame games in the past. All right, let's dive into the specific matchup, why don't we? And this is a game I think that could go in multiple directions. Can the Hoosiers hulk up against the Notre Dame run game? Now, Indiana has a pretty good run defense themselves, but first, let's talk about this great Notre Dame run game. Of course, it all revolves around Jeremiah Love. Look, you know your run game is balanced. You know your run game is deep when a guy like Jeremiah Love is not a 1,000-yard rusher. Now, he got banged up in that game against the USC Trojans. Listening to some Notre Dame podcasts, reading some Notre Dame sources, it appears that Jeremiah Love should be ready to go with the 3 weeks of rest leading into this game against the Indiana Hoosiers. So Jeremiah Love is going to be ready to go. Of course, you got Jadarian Price in that run game as well. You got the quarterback run game, of course, with Riley Leonard. This is going to be the biggest challenge for Indiana's great run defense all year long. Statistically, it doesn't get better than the Indiana Hoosiers when it comes to defending the run. They are number one. Indiana is number one in college football against the run this season. They've got some stats to back it up. They're the only team in college football to give up less than 1,000 yards as a team. They've only given up 850. They are the only team in college football to allow less than 80 rushing yards per game, and they're giving up 70.8. This is as good as it gets. Who's going to be able to win the line of scrimmage when the Notre Dame Fighting Irish have the football, I think goes a long way in determining who gets out of South Bend and advances to the Sugar Bowl to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. This is a great-on-great matchup. I had good-on-good written here, but I'm correcting myself in the moment. I'm saying great-on-great. This is going to be a really fun matchup, certainly. So we know what Indiana needs to do. They need to bring in extra resources. They need to bring extra guys into the box to be able to slow down this run game, to be able to stop this run game. They need to be able to do that, because if Notre Dame is just able to get really good yardage on first down, get really good yardage on second down, set up some of those second and shorts, set up some of those third and shorts, it makes their passing game with Riley Leonard that much more efficient and that much easier to be able to get some plays down the field, and it keeps Indiana on the football field. It keeps Indiana on the football field. It keeps them tired. Like, if you're Indiana, you can't have those drives where it's 6 minutes at a time. It's 7 minutes at a time, and you can't have Notre Dame create some of those explosive run plays, because if that happens early on in this football game, it could, not saying it will, right? We'll get to some of these more of these scenarios here in just a little bit, but it could be a long night for this Indiana Hoosiers football team. Now, when you look at Indiana and how they faced against maybe two of the better rushing attacks that they faced in the Big Ten this season, that being the Michigan Wolverines and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, Michigan rushed 34 times for 69 yards, so that's a low yards per carry. They did pretty good there against Michigan, allowing just 15 points in that football game. How about Ohio State? They rushed 29 times for 115 yards. Of course, we know the story in that game against the Buckeyes. Special teams mistakes, turning the football over, giving Ohio State an advantageous situation to be able to put more points on the scoreboard. So the question is for Indiana. Can they play well enough on first down? Can they play well enough on second down to get Riley Leonard? Now, Riley Leonard has shown throughout his career that he can make some plays with his arm. But can they get them consistently into those third and longs where they got to convert it time after time after time? Like, you get multiple third and longs on one drive. How many of those are Notre Dame going to be able to convert? How many of those consecutively can they convert in a given drive to be able to keep on moving that football down the field? That's going to be the big question in this game for Indiana. And then on the back end, their secondary certainly has to play well in those matchups against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So we know that is a huge, an absolutely huge point to start things off. Now, the second point, can Indiana's offensive line block Notre Dame up front? Look at the games where everybody talks about Indiana's margin of victory. Curt Cignetti talks about Indiana's margin of victory. But the games, obviously the one game they lost to Ohio State and the one game that was close, that Michigan game, 20-15. Okay, what was the common thread? The common thread was Indiana was not able to block well. Now, one reason why maybe they didn't block well is because those are two of the best defensive lines in all of college football. Of course, we know Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant up front for Michigan. Ask Ohio State about that. And then, of course, we know the Buckeyes with Tyler Williams, Ty Hamilton, and then those great guys coming off the edge with JTT and Jack Sawyer certainly in there. Like in those two games, Ohio State, 5 sacks. Jim Knowles just kept the pressure coming. He kept the pressure coming, and he kept the pressure coming in that football game. Once he knew that the pressure was working, that was getting Curtis Rourke and Indiana out of rhythm, it was pretty much over at that time for the Indiana Hoosiers. Michigan had 4 sacks in their matchup. 9 of the 25 sacks allowed for Indiana came in those two games against the Wolverines and the Buckeyes. Now, you look at Notre Dame up front, you got to have an eye on Riley Mills. He leads the Irish with 6.5 sacks this season. And then a healthy Howard Cross, 4 sacks and 6 tackles for loss. If he can be a big part and he gets back fully healthy, he's going to be an impact player, certainly up front. Notre Dame, 30 sacks this season. That's 37th in the country. For reference, Michigan have 31 this season. So Notre Dame and Michigan kind of in the same type of ballpark over there. Now, the big question has to be, how can Indiana, right, if they're not completely outstanding, which I don't expect them to be against this Notre Dame front, and if they're not able to block consistently and have a dominant performance up front, how do you kind of neutralize that? Of course, getting things involved with a good run game, the delay game, right? Running back draw plays, and then a screen game as well. So, and then you need to be able to block on the perimeter certainly as well. It all comes down to blocking and tackling, right? That's football in a nutshell. It always comes down to that, especially football in this type of northern type of atmosphere, which I'm certainly excited about as well. So Mike Shanahan and Curt Cignetti, I think, have to be strategic in how they call maybe some of these lateral plays at certain points in time. So there's that certainly as well. Look, I think there's a chance that they can open this thing up through the air. Like, look at, Notre Dame. Everybody talks about Indiana's schedule and how it hasn't been that great. Look at Notre Dame's schedule. Right? It has not been all that strong, certainly as well. Look at the 2 games. Look at the 2 teams that were decent throwing the football. Louisville, Tyler Shuck threw over 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was a 1-score game against Notre Dame. And then you look at that season-ending game where Jaden Maiava threw for over 300 yards, and they were moving the ball against this Notre Dame defense. Now, I know they got an All-American back there in Xavier Watts at safety, but if Indiana can protect, if they get a good amount of protection, and Curtis Rourke, if he has time, if Indiana can do their thing, if they can get in a rhythm, this is an offense that I think can have success down the field. And I think that's where Indiana wants to live. which gets me to styles making fights. I think these two football teams in this state want to do two different things. If this game is a classic cold weather, Big Ten, physical, run the football type of game, that plays well into the hands of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And if that's the way that this game trends, Notre Dame is going to win the football game. But if Indiana is able to contain the run game, if they are able to get Curtis Rourke going, if Elijah Surratt and some of these other weapons on the perimeter get going and they're able to create explosive plays down the field, maybe turn this thing into an up and down track meet, that favors the Indiana Hoosiers specifically. So I think that this game could certainly go in many directions. Which way do I think it will go? Well, I think it's going to meet somewhere in the middle for both teams. I don't think Notre Dame's going to run for 300 yards in this game. I also don't think Indiana's going to throw for 300 yards in this game. I think both teams are going to have their success in spots. Prediction time. I've got Notre Dame winning this one close. Irish 27, Indiana 24. I could see this game as a defensive battle. Could I see it 20-17? Could I see it 17-14, a Notre Dame type of game? I could see that. But we've also seen Notre Dame score a lot at times. Look at that last game against USC, where they were able to go up and down. They were able to match the USC Trojans. Like, if this does turn into a track meet, Notre Dame, even though that does favor Indiana, Notre Dame has shown the ability to respond in that type of atmosphere, in that type of game. But I could see this one being high scoring. I could see it being low scoring. But, man, at Notre Dame, just Marcus Freeman just coming off that contract extension. Notre Dame's a very fundamentally sound team. And I love the way Notre Dame plays the game of football. I think the Irish squeak by, and my prediction has Indiana's season falling short against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Boy, I think that's going to be a really fun contest. I think that's going to be a fun game. Really looking forward to that matchup in South Bend, Indiana. So that thing is going to go down Friday night. And I want to say this before I continue with some of my other predictions and games and stuff. The way this thing is scheduled fits perfectly into my schedule. Fits perfectly into the Big Ten fan schedule, where there's a sizable gap between each game. Of course, you got that Friday night game, and then we've got the noon game between Penn State and SMU. Going to be talking about that one here a little bit shortly. Then we've got the gap where Texas and Clemson play, right? And then you've got the night game with Ohio State and Tennessee. So there's no back-to-back games for Big Ten playoff games this year in this cycle. So I'm very excited about that, so I can have time to do my reactions, post them before the next game kind of slides in there already. So let's talk about the next game, and this one's going to go down at noon on Saturday. Number 11, SMU going to number 6, Penn State in the very first Saturday college football playoff game. Look, Penn State, I know Fox is not involved in these college football playoff TV negotiations, but maybe they are. Here's a big noon kickoff for you. 12 p.m. Eastern on TNT. Nittany Lions, 8.5-point favorites in State College. It is slated to be some good old northeastern December weather, which we love to see. A team from the DFW coming up to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions in this type of weather and in this type of matchup. The first thing that I want to cover, the first thing that I want to talk about and break down is SMU's offense and what Penn State needs to do to be able to slow down this Mustang offense. Now, SMU, one word that really comes to mind when I look at this Mustangs offense is balanced. And they're balanced in more ways than one. They are 20th in the country in total offense, averaging 443 yards per game. Quarterback Kevin Jennings, over 3,000 yards passing this season, 22 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions. But we talk about balance, throw game to run game. Running back Brashard Smith, over 1,200 yards this season and 14 touchdowns on the ground. So they've got a pass versus run balance. But now let's talk a little bit more about this SMU pass game. They have balance all across the amount of guys that can catch the football. There's not just one target. There's a bunch of targets that Kevin Jennings can throw to. They have no receivers over 600 yards this season. A lot of guys between 300 and 600. 6 wide receivers or tight ends have between 330 yards and 599 yards receiving on the season. 5 pass catchers have either 4 or 5 touchdown grabs this season. Some guys you're looking at: Roderick Daniels, 599 and 3 scores. Keyshawn Smith, 512 yards and 5 scores this season. Jordan Hudson, 382 yards and 5 scores. You look at Moochie Dixon, 378 yards and a touchdown. He's averaging almost 19 yards per catch. That leads the team. Former Michigan tight end Matthew Hibner, 330 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Penn State secondary is going to be stretched across the formation. What happens when we looked at the Oregon game last week? Their corners did a very good job. Evan Stewart didn't get anything. Trayshawn Holden got very little, but they were attacked in the middle of the field when Tez Johnson was able to get the ball in space, and then he was able to zigzag and he was able to create. I want to make this very clear. SMU does not have a Tez Johnson. Nobody has someone as lightning quick as a Tez Johnson coming out of the slot. I think he's the best slot receiver out there in all of college football. So I want to make that perfectly clear. But the point I'm trying to make is when you get past those 2 corners, what happens to the Penn State secondary when they spread you across with 3, 4, maybe 5 possible pass catchers? And SMU and their running backs, including Brashard Smith, have done a good job at catching the football out of the backfield as well. So keep that certainly in mind as well. So we'll see if Penn State is able to match up in those situations against the SMU Mustangs. And it's fairly obvious, right, what Penn State is going to do. They're going to get after it with Abdul Carter. They're going to get after it with Denai Dennis Sutton, with Zane Durant, with this group up front. Now, SMU has done a pretty good job in pass protection this season, okay? So I think they've only allowed 15 sacks this year, but I'm going to get this a little bit later. They haven't seen a defensive front like Penn State. There is not an Abdul Carter in the ACC. There's not a Denai Dennis Sutton. There's not a defensive line like this. So this is going to be a new challenge. It is going to be a different challenge for the SMU offensive line. But here's the thing about the pressure for Penn State that we need to keep in mind. Kevin Jennings can scoot. He can evade the rush. He's certainly got some mobility. So you need to be controlled and you need to be calculated in your pressures, and you need to be able to keep the edge. You need to be able to keep contained while still doing what you do and bring that great pass rush that Penn State has, because if he's able to break contain Jennings and he's able to get outside of the pocket, create more opportunities down the field, then in those second chance, it's playground football, right? It's create, it's find the opening, it's all that. And that's not where Penn State wants to live. Penn State wants to be able to keep the edge, and they want to be able to win those battles against the SMU offensive tackles time after time after time after time. They want to force SMU to bring more resources into pass protection and then have more limited matchups, certainly down the field as well. For Penn State, keep this offense humming. Penn State had their best offensive outing of the season against a really good Oregon defense in the Big Ten championship game. We're looking at 297 yards on the ground, 523 yards of total offense for the Nittany Lions. So you got to keep that momentum going. Penn State looked really good offensively against the Oregon Ducks. Now, when you're facing this SMU defense, here are some things to keep in mind. SMU is much better defending the run than they are defending the pass. Here's some stats for you. Excuse me. The Mustangs are 4th in FBS against the run. Only one team, the Boston College Eagles, averaged more than 5 yards per carry against the Ponies this year. SMU, 91st in the country against the pass. Boy, I kind of watch SMU. I look at that and I hear that and I think 44 in blue and white is going to have a huge day. Will he put up the type of numbers that he put up against the USC Trojans earlier this season? Well, I'm not so sure about that. That was an all-time, that was a crazy performance. That was an all-time type of performance, but he could get numbers certainly near there. I think the game plan for Andy Kotelnicki is going to be similar to what it was against Oregon. I think they're going to look to 44 early on to be able to create those plays down the field. And I also want to say this about Tyler Warren. With Beau Pribula transferring out of the program, right, that package maybe isn't there anymore. I think you're going to see more of Tyler Warren taking snaps from the shotgun to kind of replace what Beau Pribula had in those specific packages for the Penn State Nittany Lions as well. But like I was saying, I think that they're going to approach this in a similar way that they did against Oregon. Let's get this throw game going. Let's get Tyler Warren going, and let's try to take advantage of those matchups. But eventually, if that happens, I think SMU is going to shade their defense in the direction of Tyler Warren. They're going to double team him. They're going to do whatever they need to do to be able to contain him. And just like in the Penn State game, that's when you get one-on-one matchups with Amari Evans. That's when you get one-on-one matchups with Harrison Wallace. And that's when Drew Aller makes big-time throws to those types of guys. And also watch out for those running backs coming out of the backfield. I think that could be a big-time advantage for Penn State in this specific game. I think that there's yards to be had. There is production to be had for Penn State to be able to throw the ball. And then I think the run lanes are going to be able to open up for Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. You know, just overall, cats versus horses, lions versus Mustangs, Penn State's a different animal. Like, you look at SMU's schedule this season, the closest that SMU has had to a Penn State type of team were the Clemson Tigers, who lost 3 games, and the BYU Cougars. And all due respect to the Cougs, all due respect to Dabo and the Clemson Tigers, those teams aren't Penn State. They don't have the type of edge pressure and edge talent that Penn State has. They don't have the type of size up front. They don't have the type of quarterback that you can keep on going down the list. Penn State is just a different type of team coming up to the north. Coming up into this type of weather, there was snow blanketed across Beaver Stadium. It was a beautiful sight. We've been seeing this for years in the playoffs, in the National Football League, right? All the snowstorms in Buffalo. And look, I'm a fan of the Green Bay Packers. We've had great snow games and weather games over the year, and now having a team from the DFW from the South coming up to a place like State College, I think, and then of course the crowd, is going to be lit in this game. I just think too many matchups are in favor of the Penn State Nittany Lions, which leads me to my prediction. I've got Penn State putting up 31 on this SMU defense. SMU's defense has played well this season, but like I said, I think Penn State is just a different animal. Penn State 31, SMU 17, the final score. That would punch the ticket for Penn State to move on to New Year's Eve in the Fiesta Bowl to take on the Boise State Broncos. I'm excited for the weather aspect of this game in State College, Pennsylvania. We're also going to have a little bit of a weather aspect in that Indiana-Notre Dame matchup as well. So that's certainly going to be a lot of fun. Swig of water is needed on a hyped up, high energy program like this one here. Thanks everybody for tuning in to a live edition of Big Nation. 2 down, 1 to go, ladies and gentlemen. So in the mid-afternoon time slot, we've got Texas taking on Clemson. Watch out for Clemson. Watch out for Clemson. That's all I'll say about that. Everybody, I see a lot of national guys with their predictions, and they're fairly chalky. But this is college football, and we know college football has all kinds of upsets. Let's talk prime time. Under the lights, it's going to be the number 9 Tennessee Volunteers going into Columbus, Ohio to face off against the 8th-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State, a touchdown favorite at home Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff on the mothership. That is ABC and ESPN. Now, we're going to talk about offense against defense and run game and against run defense and passing. We're going to break down all of that stuff when it comes to this matchup between the Scarlet and Gray of Ohio State and the Orange and White of Tennessee. But where my eyes really drift to is between the ears. The last time that we saw this Ohio State Buckeyes team on a college football field is when they were suffering maybe the biggest upset of the season, when the Michigan Wolverines went into Columbus, Ohio and beat Ohio State 13-10, where Chip Kelly was Mr. Stubborn and he kept on running the football at the strength of the Michigan defense right up front against those defensive tackles. And there has been a lot of feedback, let's just say, given to Ryan Day and this Ohio State football program. Where is this team mentally? Has Ryan Day had enough time to get this team refocused? I think we're going to find out fairly early on in this matchup what kind of a job Ryan Day has done to get Ohio State past that loss against the Michigan Wolverines and ready for a really good, also 10-2 Tennessee Volunteers football team. Like, here's the thing, and everybody's heard it, right? Whether you're a fan of the Oregon Ducks or the Indiana Hoosiers, the Northwestern Wildcats, like everybody in the Big Ten has heard it. What the fan reaction has been, everybody's saying, fire Ryan Day and do this and do that. Like, we all know where the fan base of the Scarlet and Gray sits. So I think the worst thing that could happen in this game for Ohio State is they go 3-and-out on the first series. Tennessee goes all the way down into the end zone and scores a touchdown. Because now this perceived advantage of 100,000 plus, that's already kind of on edge as a fan base. All of a sudden, maybe it starts to work a little bit against you. So you want to be able to start out strong, which we'll get to certainly in just a little bit. You want to certainly get that crowd on your side, but just how much confidence does this coaching staff have in this personnel for Ohio State to be able to go out there? We're going to find out, I think, very early in this game. And another thing we know about Ohio State, before that game against Michigan, you get maize and blue, you get the winged helmet, you get that all out of your head. What do we know about Ohio State? They're a national championship caliber football team when they are right. When they are playing their best, when they are playing right, Ohio State is as good as it gets. Their only loss outside of Michigan, a 1-point loss to the number one team in the country, the only undefeated team in the country, the Oregon Ducks. So this is a great football team. We know that. They just need to get their head right for this game against the Tennessee Volunteers. Okay, so this is Big Ten Ted. This is not SEC Steve. So you might not follow the Tennessee Volunteers every single week, every single game. So you might look at Tennessee and be like, oh yeah, Josh Heupel, he's the head coach. Yeah, I remember back a couple of years ago when they were slinging the ball up and down the field with Hendon Hooker. I remember a couple of years ago when they carried the goalposts out of Neyland Stadium and dumped it in the Tennessee River. Yeah, I remember that. Man, that team was explosive. Man, that team could certainly get up and down the field. Now, this Tennessee team can hit those types of plays at times with Nico Iamaleava, but this offense, from a passing perspective, does not have the numbers that offense does. What Tennessee really leans into as a football team is a lot like kind of a Big Ten type of mindset. Run game and defense. That's where things really start with the Tennessee Volunteers. Let's start first with that run game, man. Now, I've been talking about all season, hey, the best running back in college football, not named Ashton Jeanty, is Caleb Johnson of Iowa. Well, Dylan Sampson certainly deserves to be in that conversation as well. He powers the Power Four's top rushing offense right now. Nearly 1,500 yards rushing this season, 22 touchdowns. He leads the Southeastern Conference in both of those categories as well. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup because we know that Tennessee is going to look to run the football. They're going to look to establish that, to open some things up with Nico Iamaleava throwing the ball down the field to some of those good receivers down the field. Guys like Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, and Squirrel White on the outside for the ball. So look, you got Tylik Williams up the middle. You got Ty Hamilton up the middle. We know about those great players certainly coming off the edge if they want to do some off-tackle stuff. We know that Ohio State has a good linebacker unit. Like, we know Ohio State is just a really good, really sound defensive football team. Someone like Caleb Downs, I think, is a guy that can take the right angle, and when Tennessee tries to bounce it to the outside and rush to the perimeter, he's the guy that can get there in a split second to be able to make the tackle and avoid a big-time gain certainly going down the field. But here's, I think, the thing that Jim Knowles and Ohio State certainly has to be aware of, right? If you're bringing extra resources up to the line of scrimmage, there have been teams against Ohio State. You saw it certainly in that Oregon game where they were attacking Denzel Burke. They were attacking Davis Igbinosun. Look at that Indiana game early. They were attacking Igbinosun because he was one of the most penalized corners in the entire country. If Josh Heupel and this Tennessee offensive coaching staff sees them kind of coming up to the line of scrimmage, is that going to be an opportunity where Tennessee is going to look to make plays over the top? So you got to be great in coverage as well as being able to dedicate resources up to the run game. But this season, when you've been able to at least contain Tennessee from a run game perspective, teams have had a pretty good outing against this Tennessee Volunteers football team. But it's not just the run game, folks. It's that defense. And I think this is where things get really, really interesting in this matchup against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tennessee's defense is fourth in the country in total defense. Ohio State is first, by the way. So these are two of the top four total defenses in all of college football. Could have a fairly lower scoring game in this matchup. Tennessee is eighth in the country against the run. I think that this Tennessee defensive line, I think this Tennessee defense as a whole presents a interesting, dare I say, difficult matchup for an Ohio State offensive line that is down two of their starters, right? One of the top centers in the country, of course, in Seth McLaughlin. Josh Simmons was out in the middle of the season over there at left tackle. Just how well are they going to be able to run the football in this game? If I'm Chip Kelly, I think I want to get Will Howard involved in some design QB run stuff. I want to get diverse in the type of run packages that I'm certainly going out there as well. But here's the thing. Like, we know that game, what Chip Kelly did against Michigan. Like, Chip, if something isn't working, go to something else. I got a feeling that Ohio State is maybe going to lean into their pass game, try to create some explosive plays down the field to, we know the suspects, Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. Carnell Tate has certainly come on a little bit more as of late here later on during the season. So I think that's what we want to get to for the Ohio State Buckeyes in this game. But nothing's going to be easy for Ohio State. Nothing's going to be easy for the Tennessee Volunteers as well during this game. I think that this could be a cold weather type of slugfest between two teams that like to run the football and two teams that play really, really good defense. Now, for Ohio State, I kind of touched on this before. I want to go into a little bit more detail here. Play confident, start fast, attack Tennessee. I thought from a play calling perspective and just the overall maybe body language of the team, they were passive in that game against the Michigan Wolverines. They did not grab out there and take the game. I mentioned the momentum that they have to create early in this game to get the crowd behind them early on in this matchup. So if I'm Chip Kelly, I want to attack. I want to attack. Whether that's hitting big plays and stretching the ball down the field, whether that's running the ball inside, whether it's running the ball outside, whatever it is, whatever the defense allows you to do, I want to be able to attack. And if on defense, I want to attack Nico Iamaleava. If I can contain Dylan Sampson in the early downs running the football, I want to put pressure on Nico. I want to have these 100,000 Ohio State maniacs behind me. and I want to get pressure on a young quarterback in a hostile environment, you got to make it tough for Nico in this specific game if Ohio State wants to come out with a victory. And you need, like, this coaching staff needs to have faith. I feel like they didn't have faith in Will Howard. It's almost like when he threw those interceptions against Michigan, they kind of shut him down. They shut him down in that game, and they didn't have confidence, and they didn't have faith in him. So they need to have confidence. He's an experienced quarterback. Let Will Howard do his thing. Get the ball to your playmakers. All right, folks, it is prediction time in this one. I don't think that this one is going to be ultra high scoring. It's got a slugfest kind of feel to it. In the end, I've got Ohio State coming out with a 3-point victory. Buckeyes 23, Volunteers 20. Notice the thing in both of these scores, field goals. I've got Tennessee kicking 2 field goals. I've got Ohio State, 3 field goals. Ohio State is a great red zone defense. I think for Tennessee to get points on the board, they're going to have to hit explosive plays. Once you get inside the 20, ask Nebraska, ask Penn State how easy it is to score in the red zone, because it's not. It's not. And I think the same goes for Ohio State going against Tennessee. I think they need to get explosive plays. It gets tougher the closer you get to against the goal line against a really good defense. But I've got the Buckeyes coming out with a first-round home playoff win and advancing to the Rose Bowl in an Ohio State-Oregon rematch from October 12th. This is a fun game. I can't wait. I cannot wait for this. I was about to say Oregon, Ohio State. It could be Oregon, Ohio State when all is said and done in this first round matchup. But, oh man, Dylan Sampson scares me a little bit. We'll see what can happen. I have a good amount of faith that Ohio State is going to be able to do their thing defensively in that game. But we'll see. We'll see. That's a fun 8-9 matchup. That's going to be a fun top half of the bracket. Of course, you got Texas and Clemson in that other game as well. So, man, it's going to be an Arizona State, of course, with Kenny Dillingham, the head coach there, Cam Scattaboo, that great running game as well. Swig of water here as we transition. Man, I cannot wait for this weekend. This is something that's going to be very new. It's going to be something that's going to be very unique, but I think it's something that college football fans have been waiting for a long time. Home playoff games. My first job out of college was covering the North Dakota State Bison up there in Fargo, North Dakota. There was nothing like home playoff games at the Fargo Dome, man. The tailgating when it's 5 degrees outside, and man, I remember that. Our camera batteries died every 30 minutes, it seems. So we had to go inside, get a new charged battery, come outside and do our reports and film some stuff. So, yeah, there's nothing like a home environment. The Fargo Dome was always lit. There's FCS, like up in Missoula, Montana, has a lit atmosphere there at Washington Grizzly Stadium. It's awesome to see postseason games, playoff games at home stadiums. Love it. Absolutely love it. All right, so those are the 3 games. Let me know who you think's going to win. Let me know by how much and how you see the quarterfinals and these first bowl games really shaping up on New Year's Day. But it's time to talk transfer portal. Couple of key segments, couple of key moves that I want to certainly touch on here. Former USC wide receiver Kyron Hudson has committed to the Penn State Nittany Lions, so that's kind of a big deal. Right? But he's not, he's a good option, but he's not, I don't think he's a number 1 type of option. Okay, we saw Kyron Hudson with that great one-handed catch against LSU in the first game of the season. That was great, but we saw Deuce Robinson make some plays. Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon really stepped up into bigger roles for USC as the season went on. So Kyron Hudson really, even though he was kind of the elder statesman of the group, he wasn't really that number 1 option. So I think he can go into, Kyron Hudson reminds me a little bit of an addition like a Julian Fleming. And Julian Fleming certainly hasn't put up the numbers that we maybe expected him to this season at Penn State. But it's certainly a step in the right direction for the Nittany Lions. Aaron Noland, the high 4-star quarterback from a couple of years ago, he entered the portal from Ohio State. So Aaron Noland is in the portal. Devin Brown is in the portal, which when you got that much talent in a loaded quarterback room at Ohio State, yeah, you're going to see guys certainly go into the transfer portal as well. And then we got Dante Dowdle, the running back from Nebraska, right? You saw Emmett Johnson go into the portal, and then he came back to Nebraska. Now you got Dante Dowdle. Like, man, we could have had a good 1-2 combination, but as of now, Dowdle, who started his career at Oregon, this past year at Nebraska, now he's in the transfer portal. Woo, the heads are spinning certainly in Lincoln, Nebraska, with a lot of things going on right now. There's another guy, one other name from Nebraska that has been in the transfer portal, wide receiver Malachi Coleman. He visited the University of Minnesota this last week, and that's where I really want to start my transfer portal goodness right now. The Minnesota Golden Gophers have been on an absolute heater in the transfer portal so far in this first week that it has been open. Now, I think Minnesota maybe learned their lesson in the freshman year of Darius Taylor. All right, how did they learn your lesson? You may ask that question, but he was kind of banged up a little bit, and they didn't have a super capable backup, really, to be able to split carries and to be able to share the load. This past year, they went into the portal. They got Marcus Major. They got C.A. Bangura in there as well. Like, they had some depth. They had Jordan Newbin in that running back room as well, and he was a little bit more balanced. And then they added the passing threat of Max Brosmer. And look at that. Darius Taylor was able to play the whole season, not like he was able to do that first year. So they're going to lose Marcus Major. He's out of eligibility. I mentioned C.A. Bangura. He's going to transfer out. Jordan Newbin is in the transfer portal as well. So Minnesota needed to go out and get some running back depth, and that's exactly what they did. Cam Davis from Washington, they were able to pick up. Now, here's the thing about Cam Davis. A couple of years back, 2022, how about 522 yards? 13 touchdowns. He was the number 2 back in that great 2022 season for the Washington Huskies. Like, he was coming off of an injury this past year, and then Washington really leaned hard into Jonah Coleman in the run game. Cam Davis rushed for 190 yards for the Huskies this past season. So he's a great depth piece, but it doesn't stop there. How about A.J. Turner transferring from the Marshall Thundering Herd? This past year put up 864 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, these next 2 guys are a little bit smaller, but they really pack a punch with their speed. 6'1", 195 for Turner. And then you got Cole Cabana from Michigan, a 4-star top 175 player from the class of 2023, 6'1", 180. Another smaller guy. What do we know about Greg Harbaugh's offense at Minnesota? They like to get their running backs involved in the pass game, and I think these are guys that have enough speed. They certainly aren't the biggest guys in the world, but these are guys that can get the ball in the perimeter, and I think that they can make some plays in the pass game as well. Now, you lose Elijah Spencer. You lose Daniel Jackson. So they needed to go out and they needed to get some wide receiver help. Javon Tracy from Miami, Ohio was certainly a big add. 57 catches, 818 yards, 7 touchdowns in 2024. He's going to play alongside Lemeki Brockington, Christian Driver, maybe Tyler Williams will step up into a bigger role for the Golden Gophers this season. But Minnesota, you talk about that wide receiver talent, they still have some questions at quarterback. Max Brosmer is out of eligibility, unfortunately. He was a really good quarterback. Drake Lindsey is the backup. 3-star guy. They don't seem ultra excited about him to take over this program right now. They got Zach Pyron out of the portal. He's from Georgia Tech. He was a 4-star prospect in the class of 22. Pyron or Lindsey don't seem like ultra great Big Ten starting quarterback options right now for Minnesota. I'd expect them to land somebody else. And then they got some defensive line depth. Rusan Lawrence transfers from FCS Stony Brook. Last year, how about 42 tackles, 8 sacks, first team All-CAA. That's the Colonial Athletic Association, certainly over there. 6'2", 270. So he's maybe not that 300-pounder that you look for, but he's very agile. He's very mobile. He proved that with his ability to get into the backfield, certainly as well. Let's move on from the Minnesota Golden Gophers, still talking transfer portal, and let's talk about that team out west. Let's talk about the Flock. Let's talk about the Oregon Ducks, and let's talk about their defense. And boy, do they have the pick of the litter. You know that there's a video out there where Shannon Sharp is sitting in front of what I assume to be a plate of Thanksgiving food, and he goes, collard greens, and he's pointing at everything. And I feel that's how Dan Lanning and Oregon has been this early in the transfer portal period, at saying, well, I want this, and I want that, and I want that, and I'm going to eat that, I'm going to eat that, I'm going to eat that. They went out and got the Big Ten All-Stars in their defensive secondary right now. Let's start first with Dylan Thieneman. He is a perfect example of what Oregon has been able to do, leveling up at the safety position. Duck fans, I don't want to remind you of this name, but you're going from a couple of years ago, going from Steve Stevens to Dylan Thieneman is a big upgrade, Trust me in that fact. Freshman All-American in 2023, Thieneman was. Last year, he led Big Ten defensive backs with 104 tackles. He broke up 7 passes. He's got exceptional range finding the football. He's just got a nose for it, man. But here's the thing about Thieneman that he's going to have to adjust to. This is kind of a weird adjustment to make because he's playing with much, much better talent at Oregon than he certainly did at Purdue. And he's playing with much better coaching at Oregon than he did with the Purdue Boilermakers. But he's going to have to get used to not doing everything, right? Not coming up and always rely on to be able to make the tackle, not always being able to get into the backfield, not always having to be able to be back there and knowing the assignments and coverage. He's going to be playing alongside great players, and I think his experience, and we'll talk about Theron Johnson here in just a minute, but the experience of these guys, there's a lot of youth. There's a lot of guys being lost this year from this Oregon secondary, but there's a lot of youth that Oregon is excited about to see it develop. We've seen all these high 4 stars and 5 stars come into Eugene, Oregon, and now you have an experienced guy like Dylan Thieneman in the Big Ten to maybe be able to coach up this next level, certainly out there as well. Theron Johnson comes in from Northwestern. He started every game for Northwestern over the past 2 seasons. Second team All Big Ten in 2024. Just another experienced, solid Big Ten corner out there. These were 2 of the best defensive backs out into the transfer portal, certainly right now. Now, here's the thing. Brandon Johnson is the only safety returning next year that saw significant playing time. And he plays like the star position for the Oregon Ducks. Like, you look at Peyton Woodyard, Aaron Flowers, Trey McNutt coming in as a true freshman in this class. They could all be in the mix to get playing time next to Dylan Thieneman, certainly next season. You looked at the corner positions. Jaleel Florence, of course, was banged up. They're very high on him. Roderick Pleasant, Dakota Fields, Naeem Offord is a true freshman out there. A lot of potential. So the experience of both Thieneman and Johnson is going to be big to be able to bring these guys on and kind of show them and teach them what it takes to be an all Big Ten type of defensive back, certainly as well. I got a few more things that I want to talk about, few more portal things that I need to get out of the way here. And I want to talk about, right now, I want to chat about Beau Pribula. This one kind of stinks. I'm not going to lie. This is not fun. This is not fun to talk about. Beau Pribula and the transfer and what's going on with him, a backup quarterback involved in the weekly game plan for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Every single week, he feels like he has to enter the transfer portal right now because he does. Okay, a day after this happened, a day after Beau Pribula entered the transfer portal, we saw the news today that Drew Aller was staying at Penn State. So it certainly makes sense that that's what happened. But because of the poor organization of the NCAA, but because of the timing of the transfer portal, December is a time when teams are going into the portal and finding their quarterback. Like, the transfer portal closes on December 28th. It closes then. So if Penn State wins their college football playoff game, which they are expected to do, Beau Pribula then would be playing a New Year's Eve game, and that is past the date in which the portal is open. Could he wait to the spring? Yes, but then he's losing opportunities. Now, there's also been the angle that's been, well, you look at a guy like Devin Brown, who has entered the transfer portal, but is staying with his team. Like, in this world of free agency, it better benefits you to detach yourself from your current situation and invest into the next opportunity, certainly going forward right now. Now, we saw this happen a little bit last year when Malik Murphy entered the transfer portal during Texas's college football playoff run, but I think that this is almost a step up, right, in significance, just because of how involved Beau Pribula was, even with a healthy Drew Aller. Malik Murphy kind of came in for an injured Quinn Ewers last season, but man, Beau Pribula is a big part of what the Penn State Nittany Lions want to do and what Andy Kotelnicki draws up from an offensive game plan perspective. Now, losing Beau it's a sizable deal. Will it prevent Penn State from going on a run? I don't think so. Like, you look, it's been talked about how easy that the Nittany Lions route is to a national semifinal. Will losing Beau Pribula cause them to lose to SMU or lose to Boise State? No, I don't see it that way. I think they're going to lean more into Tyler Warren, into that specific package, certainly as well. But man, we got to figure this thing out. Like, we're about to see schools spend $15 to $17 million on rosters every single year, and people are still throwing out the academic calendar. All right? Like, everybody throws out student athlete. Remember that South Park episode of many, many, many years ago? Like, that term, I know it's still, we still want to keep on this facade and we still want to keep on going down this track, but man, we need to find a way to split away from some of these things and a part of this previous era of college football. But I come with you solutions. I think one thing that could be done, you move the season up, making the national, make a week 1, week 0, make the conference championship games on Thanksgiving weekend and all that sort of stuff. So you have the national championship about the second week of January. Open the portal in mid-January, and there's still plenty of time, 5 to 7 weeks or so, for kids to take visits, for kids to go on Zoom calls, for kids to do whatever they do to get into the portal, have that process, and certainly get to campus by mid-March. Now, yes, does this happen after the spring semester starts at a lot of school? Yes. But I think one thing that the NCAA and one thing that we could do is, if a kid signs up for a summer class, if a kid signs up for a fall class, that allows him to be able to practice in the spring, because the spring is preparation for the fall in which they would already be enrolled in that particular situation as well. Or you could just have one transfer period and have it be in the spring. Yes, I know that kids miss out on the spring, on a possibility to get spring practice and learn schemes and learn their playbook on that. But we got to find a way to have free agency. God, it's just ridiculous saying this. To have free agency not during the season. Not during the season. Imagine if Patrick Mahomes, one of his top receivers for the Kansas City Chiefs, says, you know what? I'm going to get a chance to be the number 1 wide receiver and get paid more with the Carolina Panthers next season. Boy, would that be a weird jump. But anyway, indulge me for just a minute. So actually, I'm not going to play in the playoffs. I'm actually going to go to Carolina right now and kind of get ready with them. What? It's crazy. We got to find a way to figure this out. It cannot be during the season. It just can't be. You can't be losing pieces off of a potential championship team as big as somebody like a Beau Pribula. Coaches, keep talking. Keep bringing this thing up. I know it might seem like it's complaining, but this specific issue is certainly the truth. And it's a shame that kids have to make this decision. It's a shame that Beau Pribula had to make this decision and be ripped away from this championship run. I'm sure that Penn State team is going to have so much fun, a home playoff game and all these other games that Beau Pribula will not be able to be a part of, because the opportunity is now for him to be a starting quarterback somewhere else across college football. And he is certainly talented enough to be a really good starting quarterback somewhere else. I'm excited to see where Beau winds up. Beau, I'm sorry, you got to be dealt with this type of situation as well. All right, we're going to finish the show up talking about some other transfer portal notes. How about former Auburn quarterback Hank Brown transferring to Iowa? Hank Brown still has a good amount of eligibility left. You've got Brendan Sullivan with 1 year of eligibility left over there with the Iowa Hawkeyes. So you got to imagine we're going to see Brendan in there. You saw Marco Linez, who people thought was maybe the future at Iowa at quarterback. He transferred out, as did Cade McNamara. So you need a quarterback of the future, and Hank Brown is certainly that guy to be able to plug in to Iowa. We've seen Danny O'Neal and now Billy Edwards sign with Wisconsin. The hamster wheel keeps on turning, folks. It keeps on going around and around and around and around. Danny O'Neal, over 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks in his freshman season at San Diego State. So he's got 3 years of eligibility left. Billy Edwards over there at Maryland. He put up a lot of yards this season, over 2,800 yards. That's third in the Big Ten, but 15 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. He was 10th in the Big Ten in touchdown passes this season. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. Like, since Luke Fickell has taken over this Wisconsin Badgers football program, they have taken 6 transfer quarterbacks in 3 years. The moves of Danny O'Neal and Billy Edwards, it doesn't exactly equal a lot of trust in somebody like Mabry Matoyer, who was a high 3-star, low 4-star type of freshman. You look at Carter Smith coming into this class. Man, this thing, eventually you got to gain traction. And I know injuries have played a big part in this, so maybe I'm being a little bit hard on Luke Fickell and this Wisconsin Badgers program right now, but eventually you got to stop spinning on the wheel. You got to put your feet on the ground. We'll see if Billy Edwards, maybe I'm wrong, maybe he's going to be, but how much different is Billy Edwards to someone like Tyler Van Dyke? Certainly don't think there's a huge difference. We'll see how things go in Madison, Wisconsin. Donovan McCulley ends up transferring from Indiana. He was a leading receiver for the Hoosiers in 2022. He goes to Michigan, and maybe this is the start of them getting better options in the passing game down the field. Bryce Underwood to Donovan McCulley could be a combination to certainly look out for as well. Fernando Mendoza in the transfer portal, the experienced quarterback from Cal. He's kind of one of the more higher profile guys out there in terms of the quarterback transfer portal market right now. Wisconsin was originally in that race. I assume they're not anymore by picking up Billy Edwards Jr. Indiana and UCLA certainly remain, and there is a big need for quarterback for both of those teams. Still interested to see what Indiana does with Taven Jackson, who was a highly recruited guy a couple of years ago, the current backup quarterback for IU. But UCLA certainly needs a quarterback out there in Westwood. Folks, there is no shortage of stuff going on here in the month of December. Want to thank all of you for coming along for the ride here on this Monday night edition of Big Nation. Here's kind of what's coming up. Here's what's coming up. If some big transfer portal news pops up, going to do an uploaded video, some uploaded content on there. Otherwise, hey, I'm going to see you on Friday. It's a busy time. Of course, it's the Christmas season. Got a lot going on. So I thought I'd come in here and we'd cover this. And then we got football game on a Friday night. We got football games on Saturday. And we're going to go from 12 down to 8 when this weekend is all said and done. Thanks for coming along for the ride here tonight. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.